I am so conservative.
Rationalize in my head. These are things I read.
And I'm going to talk about Willow Creek.
Okay.
Willow Creek, a few years back, had
I
invited...
remembered at the time when Will Rogers said, I don't belong to any organized religion. I'm a Baptist.
Yeah. I am so conservative. If you didn't jump to conclusions, you might not get any exercise. I am so conservative. Welcome to the Unknown Webcast. This is a safety warning for newcomers, viewers that haven't been here before. I have to point out that I really am so conservative I can't turn left even when I'm driving. It is especially true that I am theologically conservative. I want to know and believe what's true, and I'm willing to change my ideas if the evidence points in that direction. So this is a trigger warning for those who need a safe space. We're going to challenge ideas, and we're going to test your commitments. And if that is offensive to you, you probably want to dial out right away. Today is September 29, 2020, and this is broadcast number 209. Pam Frost from Truth Exchange is a first-time guest joining us to talk about merging contemplative arts into the faith on today's Unknown Webcast. My name is Don Vino. I'm president of Midwest Christian Outreach, Inc. in Wonder Lake, Illinois, which produces the Unknown Webcast, and our senior researcher, co-host, and resident COVID-19 tracker is Ron Hensel, who will introduce the sponsor of today's webcast. And here's Ronnie Baby.
I resigned. Did you not catch the memo? I don't do the COVID-19 tracking anymore.
Well, now we're going to be off track. What am I going to do?
You just got to stop saying it. I just couldn't keep up anymore. You know, we're gearing back up. I'm teaching adult Sunday school again, and I have to prepare a lesson every week, and I'm preaching every once in a while in my church. I just don't have time to do it. So,
but how do you teach adult Sunday school? You're not an adult. You're childish.
I've not grown up yet, but that doesn't keep me from, It's like, you know why do adults ask kids what they want to be when they grow up? It's because they're looking for ideas. So
I love that. That's really good. I got to remember that. I got to go find some kids.
Yes. So, greetings from sunny Florida. Oh, just so you know, if you go to my Facebook page, you won't find my latest COVID-19 spreadsheet because I just couldn't keep up anymore. I apologize. But anyways, greetings from sunny Florida, where the palm trees came out, saw their shadows, and now we have 12 more months of summer. Our sponsors for this week's webcast include the Coexist Boutique, for when you care enough to take your hands off your loved ones' throats long enough to pick out the perfect gift, the Coexist Boutique, and the Designer Jesus Collection. No longer need your church's Jesus, be a source of social embarrassment. Check out the Designer Jesus Collection at a church runway near you. And if you really enjoy our webcast, or if it really annoys you and you want to inflict it on someone else to ensure your continued access, please go to midwestoutreach.org, click the yellow donate button, and contribute as you feel led. And don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube. Welcome, Pam Frost from Truth Exchange.
Thank you. I'm really happy to be here with you guys.
We are glad to have you, and when we're done, you will know you have been had.
Which is our way,
I can see that.
Which is our way of saying we hope you're still happy after you through our little ringer here. So what are we talking about today, guys?
Well, we'll get to that in a moment because I want to do a little bit more of an
She's from the Truth
introduction.
Exchange. Are we exchanging the truth for something else today?
No, but
No?
others have done that.
Others have done that.
I hear it's something about that in Romans 1. They exchange the truth.
125. Yeah.
Yeah. Is that your organization's verse?
Yeah. I work for Dr. Peter Jones. And I should say, really, technically, I volunteer. I'm a volunteer with the ministry. I've been with them for about 15 years. And the ministry is based on Romans 1:25. They exchanged the truth of God for the lie and worshiped the creation rather than the creator, who is blessed forever. Amen. And so, yes, that's the foundation of the ministry is drawing the distinction between the truth of God and the lie of paganism, the worship of creation in all its multiple forms.
Okay. Wow. That's more than I thought I would get when I asked that question. Sorry to interrupt you, Don. I knew you were going to say something. I hope I didn't.
No, that's perfectly fine. Richard Neal, by the way, wants a white cassock from the Rome store. Just
A white
so you
cassock
know.
from the Rome store.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I don't think World's End Theology offers that actually, but
well, we can check. It might be in the catalog. Go ahead, guys.
Okay. Right. So she works with Dr. Peter Jones at the Truth Exchange. And you're right. That was a great question, Ron, which is going to lead me kind of to my next little question. And that is, we had Peter Jones on last week, as you know. Loved meeting. Oh, by the way, you might relay this to him. Marcia Montenegro wants to send her greetings to him. She had spoken at his conference a number of years ago. So, but he mentioned something about oneism and twoism. I'm certain you've heard that before from him. Can you explain that? Because that's sort of going to go into what we're talking about today.
Yeah, absolutely. Be happy to. Well, as you know, based on Romans 1:25, you either worship the creator, and this is the twoism that he explains. By the way, Carl Teichripp calls it otherness. Instead of twoism, but Dr. Jones uses the terminology of twoism, just simply meaning that there are two distinct ontological essences, and ontology is just, as you guys know, is just the study of existence, of being. So the creator is distinct from creation, completely distinct, and it's the world where we understand and believe that in the objective real world, we recognize the binary distinctions that the creator, who is outside of us, made. There's a distinction between creator and creation, between male and female, and between good and evil. Now, oneism means that all is one ultimately. This is what it means. All is one and all is divine. And of course, you see that in the Garden of Eden and the temptation. And the great lie that the serpent said, blow off God's word, has God really said, contradicts the penalty for sin, says you surely won't die, but you'll actually be transformed into divinity. And so oneism is ultimately about transforming humanity into divinity and about also divinizing all of creation, because oneism dissolves all distinctions. So while you might think you're in a process of mystically becoming divine, you're also in a process of psychologically dissolving the distinction between humanity and the animal kingdom and the rest of the world. So we see that having actual very serious political ramifications.
Right. Well, and ramifications within the church.
Yes.
I just want to touch on this. I had not planned on doing this, but it seems to fit because, as you know, we've done a book on the Enneagram, Richard Rohr and the Enneagram, and I'm very, very involved with that. And one of the recurring themes there is this idea that we are with God. He really does subscribe to this oneism in his panentheistic view. Would you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. Now, are you talking specifically about Richard Rohr?
Yes.
In particular? Yeah, he came into my screen of awareness back in 2000, believe it was 2007, when he gave one of the plenary talks at the Solarized Learning Community. Believe it was the one held in the Bahamas. I don't know if you recall back. This was the emergent church movement. This was hosted by Spencer Burke, who used to have the website ooze.com.
Right.
Do not look it up. It doesn't exist anymore. And I can't remember if it's the ooze or ooze, but I had looked it up years ago and got on a very bad website that you don't want to go to.
A different kind of ooze, right?
Yeah, it was really a shock.
Don't want to know.
Yeah, you don't want to know. So just don't look that up.
Not interested.
Spencer Burke doesn't have that website anymore. But Richard Rohr was speaking, to a group of the broad spectrum of emergence, running the gamut between like Mark Driscoll, who I have some problems with, but still he understands the biblical gospel.
We think.
I hope. I'm very well aware of the problems. And people like Brian McLaren, who's an out and out pagan. But Richard Rohr was teaching them that the Christ is in the DNA of everything. You don't need salvation. And this, you've studied him. This is his constant diatribe is you don't need to put personal faith in Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior for your sin. You're already the Christ, because the Christ, he said later, I heard him speak on a program to Monsignor Nolan, in which he said the Christ was the Big Bang. The Big Bang was the Christ event in which all of creation is infused with the Christ and is divine. And so just by nature of your being, you are divine, you are Christed, you are Christ. And Jesus is, he was a historical man, but he was not Jesus, the Messiah, the Christ. So pure heresy. And also, 1 John 1:4, that's the formula that says this is the spirit of Antichrist. If you deny that Jesus Christ has come in the flesh, this is Yeshua, the Jewish Messiah. So anyways, he denies that, and all is one, all is Christ.
Right. So that's important, because that's really infiltrated in the church with New Age Eastern mystical thinking. And Rohr has become one of the sort of theologians of many contemporary churches today, unfortunately. So, but our topic today is dealing with how Eastern mysticism through contemplative arts is permeating the church, but it's really permeating society as well.
Absolutely.
And one of the things you recently took part of, you mentioned my friend Carl Teichert. I love Carl. And we often talk about the religion of man versus the religion of God. And those two are always in competition. It's kind of the same concept that you discussed of oneism versus twoism. And so he was part of an event which we did something on earlier this year, UN 2020, where they said that they were, how did they phrase it? UN 2020, where they create the UN, they are shaping the UN they want to create the world they need. Right? Creating the UN they want to shape the world we need. Now that struck me as I read, and I'll share this, one of the slides we want to begin with, because you too attended an online conference.
Yep.
Which is Karma Chameleon. No, Karma Summit 2020, hosted by, you might want to say his name. So
Abhishek Humbad.
Abhishek Humbad of Good Era. Now, is that Good Era? Is that what they're trying to get at? Good Era?
Yeah. No, I actually don't know what the word means. It's Gudera. It's based in India. He's, an Indian man. Yeah. Okay. So but he pronounces it Gudera.
Okay. So what is it that they're trying to accomplish? They kind of lay this out here. What is it they're trying to accomplish in this conference, and how effective do you think they are going to be?
Well, Okay, thank you for those two questions. Let me start with the first one. What they're trying to accomplish is really a universal shift towards creating based on inner human goodness, creating a new normal based on compassion, loving kindness, and innate human goodness. So this is just exactly what we're talking about. It's based on oneism entirely. So
Okay.
yeah, and then how successful are they? I think they're surprisingly successful. As I dug down into this, the what their focus is on, what Gudera does is it's a technology company that facilitates businesses and NGOs in mobilizing an army of volunteers. So for global volunteerism, you're really talking about and COVID has provided this opportunity for eliminating international boundaries, international borders, creating kind of a one world government. And I just want to read you kind of the formula that this was, in a nutshell, the formula that I came away with after listening to the entire 12-hour conference spread out over 2 days. Because of COVID-19, the world is in lockdown. Okay, this has led to an economic crisis globally. And just parenthetically, I just listened to a video presentation by the World Economic Forum in which they said that because of COVID, 80 million people have been added to the poverty level because of the lockdowns. So anyways, the economic hardship is exponentially growing and evident. So, and the way people work has changed. Instead of going to work, you're working from home. So now everyone is connected by internet, by Zoom. And so they have been working actually I wasn't aware of this, but diving down deeper into it, these ideas have been influencing major multinational corporations for much longer than I ever had understood. This is a locomotive in process that's on the rails. It's not just something that arose and is new, but through virtual volunteerism, through technology, then you've got to support Black Lives Matters, racial, social, gender justice. Everything is inclusive, and all of these things combined because of man, and especially, of course, as you can imagine, this is appealing to particularly millennials and Genners, right, Gen Zers, younger people, and they're forming the new normal. They believe they can create a new normal based on the internal intrinsic goodness and compassion within man. So it is a completely oneist movement.
Okay, so here's what I want to bring up, and then it sounds like Ron might have a question. I heard him take a deep breath.
Yeah, that's always a sign. I start to breathe.
It is. So just so we know this, you might note up here who was participating. This is important.
Yeah,
Coca-Cola, right. J.M. Smucker Company, Nestle, Uber, Exxon, Mobil, Mondes International, Blink Health, Novartis, the Ford Foundation, General Electric. These are not small companies. These are big corporations, right?
Yeah, and when you're the one who encouraged me to attend this, right, you would think something called Karma Summit 2020. It's just new agey, kind of went off out there, not important. But as you see here on the slide, over 4,000 people were in attendance from 42 countries, and the major speakers were representative of big multinational corporations. This was no small one-off event or movement.
Right. So, and you show the theme, creating a better new normal through virtual volunteerism to advance the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So again, we're seeing this theme. We had this with our UN 2020 report. We have this here. There's this move for a one world government and one world economic plan guided by particular spirituality, which, as it happens, is Eastern mysticism.
Absolutely. And, I think we need to clarify, especially in terms of the United Nations involvement in the Sustainable Development Goals, they're packaged as very benevolent to people. The goals are we want to end poverty, create global equity, and yet ultimately these ideas, these oneist ideas, ultimately follow the serpent's disdain, dislike, and hatred of human beings created in the image and likeness of God. And you'll find, particularly I'm sure you guys are very well aware, that the Sustainable Development Goals were originally introduced as a result of the Rio Earth Summit in 1992 in the document Agenda 21. And that laid out the plan, essentially the New World United Nations plan for what's going to happen in the planet in the 21st century. And then they recently have the document Agenda 2030, which is how to implement it and complete it by the year 2030. So rather than being benevolent towards human beings, although that is how it's packaged, it really represents the worship of the earth, but even then, not for the benefit of the earth. Right. It's because, like, for example, here in California, where I live, up in Northern California for years, in the name of sustainability and in protection of nature and the worship of Gaia, so to speak, they have not allowed good forestry management. They have not allowed the clearing of dead wood and the thinning of our forests. So now we have millions of acres of forest burning with fuel.
And they're blaming it on global warming.
And they're blaming it on global warming. When God made man stewards over nature under God's authority. So anyways, it never works out well either for the planet that we say we're going to protect and preserve, but especially not for man. And under Agenda 21, Agenda 2030, the Sustainable Development Goals, the bottom line with where those are headed is to create a one world global government, eliminate national boundaries, eliminate elective government, representative government, and essentially strip away all rights and freedoms of humanity. One of their goals in these documents is to urbanize. It's for the urbanization of everything. Crowd people into condensed urban centers where you have massive surveillance systems controlling everybody. You have no private property ownership. You don't have any control over food, agriculture, water, energy. You're a prisoner. I mean, it's really 1984. It's Big Brother on steroids. But unfortunately, that really is the plan. And let me just point out this, because also in the same panel, it was kind of a panel discussion on the World Economic Forum. They talked about, as a result of COVID-19 and the great impoverishment of populations, particularly in third world countries, that people are now moving out of rural areas and they're being urbanized. Okay. So it's really yeah,
Well, it is. And, a big problem in all of this is the process of trying to get along. Because what do you do with someone who's into Eastern mysticism, let's say, or someone who's involved with Islam, someone who's like myself, I'm so conservative I can't turn left even when I'm driving, conservative, theologically individual. How do you even function as a family, or how do you deal with?
Thanksgiving's coming up, isn't it?
It is. So how do you prepare for something like that?
And we had this problem last year. I think it even made the newspaper
about the same time. Yeah.
Do you struggle with finding the right wine to bring to pagan goat sacrifices? Do you wonder what to wear to your neighbor's neo-Nazi parties? Do you get anxiety attacks when trying to find the right picket sign to share with your friends from Westboro Baptist Church? Well, now you can put an end to all the worries that come from trying to fit in with people on opposing sides of the culture wars, because you can find the perfect gift for any ideology at the Coexist Boutique. This week's special deal at the Coexist Boutique in honor of the 50th anniversary of Mao Zedong's Cultural Revolution. Relive the days when university students subjected their professors to public shaming sessions in which they would break their eyeglasses and publicly rebuke them at great length for not exhibiting politically correct opinions and behaviors. Oh, wait, that's going on right now in the USA. So in honor of that great epic-making event, Cultural Revolution Eyewear, that is the genuine smashed Chinese prescription lenses and frames formerly owned by PhDs and university administrators dating back from to 1966 to 1976, only 99 cents a pair at the Coexist Boutique. For when you care enough to take off your hands off your loved one's throats long enough to pick out the perfect gift. So just when you really need to, get the opposing sides together and have that bonding moment. As you're talking, I'm flashing back to my younger days. I used to really be into like the music of the 60s and 70s. I still like it. 1970, Chicago 2. That's the album with Color My World, 25 or 6 to 4, Make Me Smile. You guys know those songs, right?
Yeah, right.
You might not know that if you, I think in the CD version, they try to, shrink down. Back then, albums had all these nice pull-out things. Sometimes they had posters or booklets or something like that. Well, in the Chicago 2 album, whatever the pullout had, it had a dedication. It said dedicated to the revolution in all its forms. The early Chicago was very, very much into liberal politics. The next year, 71, came out with 2 songs. Of course, Imagine by John Lennon. Imagine there's no nations, no heaven, no earth, no countries, just a big brotherhood of man. And also a song by Graham Nash called Chicago, because at that time they were trying the Chicago 7. It's 3 years after the Democratic National Convention, and they rounded up a few of the guys who started the riots and charged them with inciting riot. And so there are some people who felt that certain things in that trial were unfair. One of them was Graham Nash of Crosby, Stills and Nash. And he wrote a song called Chicago. And the chorus says, "We can change the world, rearrange the world." He sings this over and over.
Right. Yeah, sure.
We can change the world. And then the next year, Chicago comes out with Chicago 5, which has the song Dialogue. And Dialogue Part 1 and 2. And Part 2, we can change the world now. We can make it better. We can change the world now. It's like there was this belief, you were talking about it earlier, this belief that we can totally reform the world in the image that we want it to have. We can take away national boundaries. We can eliminate currency. We can simply by unifying the whole world and completely reordering it, we can get rid of all these problems.
Right.
We can get rid of all this unfairness. And this was one of the beliefs that was very prominent in a very large section of the youth movement of the 60s and early 70s. you could argue that a lot. I mean, you could argue that it started to peter out. I mean, I didn't detect the same ideology. I mean, a few years later, Chicago was singing "America Needs You, Harry Truman." It's like wow, that's a little different. I mean, Harry Truman is kind of known for some of his racial views, and they think America needs him. Okay, okay, you've obviously changed a little bit, Chicago. Maybe all that money changed them.
Well, yeah, well, it could be they became capitalists, sort of. Well,
Yeah.
Joy and I watched a film, a 1975 film last night, Sissy Spacek, called Catherine, which is about the revolution of the 1960s, 70s, and how the main character got brought into that. Arthur, who plays Arthur Fonzarelli?
I always just call him the Fonz.
Yeah, he was in it as well.
Henry Winkler. Henry Winkler.
Henry Winkler was in it as well.
Hey.
And it really is following through from like 1964 to about 1972 or so, when the weathermen were blowing up buildings. And the whole idea was to transform the world to get to this utopia. We want to get back to the garden. That sounds like a song.
What better way to do it?
Joni Mitchell.
Right? So this is what we're seeing in culture, but we're seeing this also in this Karmic Institute. I want to get back to this for a moment because of a couple things they say, which is that the goal you have is create a people's movement. We've heard this before, but through karma movement of global digital citizens who are ready to realize a collective vision for a better world for all. I mean, it sounds inviting. It's just false is a problem.
But karma doesn't. Why would they pick karma? That's like what goes around comes around. Instant karma. It's going to get you.
Well, that's why it's karma chameleon. I think it's
John Lennon
deceiving.
Yeah.
So okay, but regardless of the name, they are, they have. They have an eschatology. Let's put it this way.
They do.
Yes, absolutely.
And so you've got to wonder, usually in eschatology, the question of how you get from here to there, that end times view that they're trying to establish, there's something that gets you, there's a bridge. We call our bridge the gospel,
Right.
So what's their bridge? Is it good news?
Well, their good news, their version of the good news is inner compassion and inner goodness. And it's this really, I don't know if you saw on the slide, they were promoting something called, they want to get away from capitalism.
Right.
And they want to implement something called stakeholder capitalism, which is just terminology that cleverly disguises Marxist economic views of the redistribution of wealth, take from the haves, give to the have-nots. Some of the suggestions that they made, for instance, within this global volunteering scenario, is that corporations, and by the way, I just in looking up some of the speakers and digging down a little bit further on them, I found that corporations have been doing this and implementing these ideas for quite some time, which I was unaware of. And they have things like executive president of or vice chairman or executive vice president of volunteerism. Titles of positions I had no idea existed, but they want companies to pay their employees. Part of your time that you work for the company, you're to be paid as a global volunteer, as part of this network of global volunteerism to transform and make the world a better place. And you, as an employee, are to dedicate part of your salary to elevating the lives of others who don't have as much as you. I mean, bottom line is it's the redistribution of wealth based on, well, really, it's the principles that they were encouraging everybody to implement, and I could see are already being really deeply implemented, are the 3 E's of sustainable development goals, which are ecology, economy, and equity. the ecology we know. It's essentially the Green New Deal. Worship the earth, man, move over. You're a pariah. Forget your rights. And the economy, transform the economy from a free market economy to an international economy based on redistribution of wealth, and then equity. Equity is equal outcomes, as you guys know. So
right.
These were the three principles. So this is a utopian ideal. It is very anti-biblical because it's seeking to eliminate national boundaries, national borders. God is the one, in Genesis 11, he gives us the table of the nations. In Acts 17, he explains that he alone establishes the borders of nations. He deals with people. He puts us in the nations. So this is really, beneath this is a very anti-biblical and anti-human being ideology. And it's interesting because, they claim that they're going to remake this new world, the new, better, new normal, based on inner compassion. And one of the speakers who I've mentioned to you, Don, is this Hindu man, Kailash Satyarthi, who is he's a Nobel laureate for his work in essentially protection for children globally, setting them free from slavery and forced labor in many third world countries. But he was talking about transforming, redefining, reshaping, completely rebuilding, restructuring governments, politics, economies, societies, and all religions,
right,
based on compassion. Okay, Kailash Satyarthi is also somebody he mentioned in a later talk that he gave in Karma Summit 2020, that he is working personally with the Dalai Lama, who's the head of Tibetan Buddhism, in the United States to spread this message of global compassion. And as I'm sure you know, the Dalai Lama has, since his exile from Tibet in Dharamsala, India, he has become the self-appointed international ambassador for what he calls compassion and loving kindness. And the compassion and loving kindness are based on Tibetan Buddhist meditative techniques, particularly mindfulness meditation.
right.
And this is where we come into the spiritual component of.
Now, I want you to hold that a second. We don't want to talk about that, but I want to go to a question before we get too far away that Neil had asked. Why would multinational corporations back Marxism?
I don't think that's actually a really good question, and it probably has multiple layers of truth, of reality. On one level, multinational corporations are driven by capitalist earnings,
right?
Capitalist economics of making money. On the other hand, some of the largest, not particularly the ones listed here, although it could include some of them. I haven't looked at the latest list, but the annual World Economic Forum, for instance, that meets in Davos, Switzerland in late January every year, it has a group of inner elites that are political leaders and heads of major multinational corporations. So, and their plan is following the United Nations. It is for ultimately the establishment of a one world government, elimination of global boundaries. Now, so here's where it gets interesting, because while they want to implement Marxist ideology and economics, ultimately, but beneath the veiling of language, if you know how to read it and interpret it, they themselves, so they want that for the rest of us. They want to control everybody else. So that means those corporations that are participating with Klaus Schwab and Prince Charles and the leaders of the World Economic Forum, their plan is to become the mega wealthy owners of everything. And the rest of us are under their control.
Which is exactly what Marxism was supposed to cure.
Well, no, because in truth, Marxism, mark this. This is not mine. I picked this up from someone else.
But you promised, yeah.
Marxism is not for the Marxists, it's for the people.
Right.
Marxism is not for the Marxists, it's for the people.
That's the way it's played out.
Absolutely.
Every single time it's been tried, it's played out that way.
It's played out that way, right?
Yeah. So,
well,
yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, I would say, to help answer Richard Neal's question, first of all, I would say that I don't know if we can speak for all heads of multinational corporations.
Right.
I think they're a diverse bunch.
Absolutely.
But I think they're also a reflection of the culture that they were brought up in. And here's a few things we can say about the culture. There are a lot of people who are Marxists because they believe no one's ever done it right, but they somehow know how to do it right. Okay, well, those are the biggest fools of all. So let's go to the second biggest fools, the ones who really didn't study it and really see. So there are people who have an impression of Marxism based on the promises, not on the product. They say, well, you're overblowing. Absolutely. You're just being cynical if you think it can't be done, or whatever. You're just overblowing some of the flaws, because maybe they listened to Noam Chomsky one day talk about how the average worker in Czechoslovakia was living in a worker's paradise during the Cold War, and they believed him. This is the thing. I know people who actually think that Noam Chomsky's worldview represents reality.
Right.
When I don't, it's just the most bizarre thing I've ever heard. So in any case, you have people who are just ignorant. You have people who are very naive. You have people who are afraid. I think there's a fear aspect to why a lot of people jump on board, because they know that the discontented masses can cause real trouble. So let's give them something, throw them a bone. We'll just give them a little bit of socialism now and hope they go away, but they won't. So
yeah. No, I think you're absolutely right. I think your points are really excellent. And I actually really saw that aspect too, that I think companies are being pressured to implement at least an acceptable outward amount of these ideologies to make it look right. Okay, we're complying. Okay, we're doing this. Now, I think you're completely right. There's a wide range of corporate executives and what their intentions are. I'd say that the group of inner elites that are working closely in collaboration with in the secret meetings of the World Economic Forum are probably on board with that plan. But one thing I also have seen, just in diving a little deeper into the World Economic Forum, they're appealing to, in fact, this January in Davos, they are planning to start implementing what they're calling the Great Reset of everything, especially the global economy. This was announced in June, on June 3rd, by Klaus Schwab, who is the founder and chief executive of the World Economic Forum, and Prince Charles, who is a perennialist, meaning that he believes that all religions are one, they all lead to the same place, and he's also an ecologist, wants to green the world. Well, they plan the global reset of everything, and then in this meeting in Davos, they are opening it up. They're having an in-person meeting, probably of their global elites, but they're also opening it up to a virtual meeting of young international leaders, young corporate leaders, from 400 countries. I believe there are 2 representatives of young leaders from all not countries, cities. Sorry about that. 400 cities around the world. And so what has occurred to me is you think of this, like the Karma Summit 2020 also was geared towards young people. Now you've got the World Economic Forum raising up young corporate executives, the young world leaders. Well, you think about it. They didn't live through any of the world wars. They've probably not been taught very much of history in the education system, because the world core curriculum designed by the theosophist Robert Mueller of the United Nations has gone globally. We the core curriculum in the United States is based on this world core curriculum. So this is a massive indoctrination program where, like you said, Ron, young people are graduating from college and they'll announce, I'm a Marxist. Well, they don't even really know what that means. And I recently heard somebody quote from Ronald Reagan, and I can't remember who I was listening to, but I thought it was excellent insight. Communists read Karl Marx. Non-communists and anti-communists understand Karl Marx.
Right, yes. So I talked about naivete, I talked about ignorance, I talked about fear, but there is another thing, and that's greed. One of the things that communism portrays all capitalism as greed. And I think that's a very unfair reading of Adam Smith myself. But one of the things that Vladimir Lenin said was, the capitalists will sell us the rope with which we will hang them.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's what's happening, right? What is Facebook doing in China? What is Google doing in China? What are they? I don't know if Facebook's allowed in China or not, but Google has to comply by very strict rules. Not just China, though. The Marxists here, the Marxists are customers, and I think that's the way a lot of multinational corporations look at them.
Right.
So we will sell them as much of what, they really don't believe that this is to their detriment. I go on, I keep very weird hours because I used to drive Uber at night and I can't get back to regular time. So what I do now at midnight to 2 is I go on to some of the Twitter accounts that are monitoring what's going on in Portland, like every night, like a riot. And I've stumbled across Twitter accounts that exist only to communicate with other rioters. They'll put a tweet will go out on one of these accounts. Okay, the police are over here. Everybody go around this way. They're using social media to advance an anarchist agenda.
Right.
You've got to wonder how many private accounts there are, because you can lock those accounts. You don't, and only people you choose then are able to get to them.
Yeah.
You can make it a private feed. You got to wonder how many private feeds are out there that are putting even worse stuff than that.
Now, I would say all of these things are, to me, merely tools to get to something more important to the organizers, which is, as you point out, to practice mindfulness and redefine every religion according to compassion. The whole goal is to make every religion one.
Absolutely.
Right. All of this other stuff is just sort of the way to get there.
Yes.
Eliminating capitalism, going towards stakeholder capitalism, trying to get people focused on getting rid of borders and becoming just internationalist, if you will, citizens of the world. And in the process, though, of trying to get everyone to practice mindfulness, to redefine their religious experience, to have one religion, you have to deal with this Jesus character, who every group, in fact, I created a good Jesus keeping seal of approval. Every group has to have a Jesus for their group, because somehow it gives them credibility.
Well, it also gives them unity. It brings them together. We all like Jesus, right?
It does.
But which Jesus do you like? Well, maybe they won't always, the important thing is that you have a Jesus that doesn't embarrass you, which is why we ask the question, do you cringe when the Christians you hang out with try to introduce Jesus to your non-Christian friends? Well, you can say goodbye to the days when your church's Jesus was a source of social embarrassment. Now even your church can keep pace with the latest fashion-forward trends in spirituality. Introducing the Designer Jesus Collection. These amazing new Jesus styles are hitting church runways in the most exclusive Jesus fashion shows at churches near you. You don't want to miss Yoga Jesus, Hipster Jesus, Buddy Jesus, Socialist Jesus, Mormon Jesus, and of course, Muslim Jesus. At Designer Jesus Collection fashion shows, you'll find a Jesus you'll be proud to introduce to your most sophisticated, cutting-edge friends and acquaintances. Please observe the attendance requirements, cost of admission, your eternal soul, required attire, semi-formal. All proceeds benefit His Royal Majesty, the Kingdom of Darkness. The Designer Jesus Collection, London, Paris, Rome, New York, Salt Lake City, and coming to a church runway near you. So you need to check it out.
Well,
Nobody wants an embarrassing Jesus.
yeah, I mean, the true Jesus, who is the only savior of the world, is being massively rejected, and
Right.
to preach that gospel of his beautiful blood atonement for sinners is being likened to hate speech, because we're exclusive. He is exclusive. It's an exclusive message. And just like Ron brought up the riots in Portland, they really epitomize the ideal of utopianism, which is by any means possible, you must tear down the old. You must create, use chaos, create chaos, tear all the old structures down, so that out of the ashes, like the phoenix arising out of the ashes to a new birth, you can create utopia. I mean, this is the idea. So you have license to steal, kill, burn, and destroy. Sounds pretty much like Paul's description of Satan, who came to steal, kill, and destroy. But so out of this behavior based on an ideology that follows the line of the devil, you think you can rebuild a utopia in its place. It has never happened and can't happen, because it is humanism. It is man worshipped as God, under the control of the evil one. You said the kingdom of darkness there in your Designer Jesus. So right. Yeah, that's right. Who is behind all this.
There's a category of propaganda that was pioneered in communism, but it's used in anarchism and all that. It's called agitprop. When you start talking to these people, and I've known some of them personally, they delve into all this vocabulary, and it sends you rushing for Wikipedia articles and dictionary entries. And agitprop was one of those terms that I ran to, and I'm thinking, wait a minute, it says the dictionary and Wikipedia says this is propaganda through art, literature, music, drama, etc. But what's the agit? Well, the word agit, the agit part comes from the word agitation. And that is the etymology of the term. In other words, it was propaganda designed to agitate. Propaganda designed to make people dissatisfied. So in other words, in agitprop, you're using literature, art, music, and drama in a very specific way. You're trying to make people think that you're trying to agitate people. You're trying to get them to think that things are not right. Things are not the way they should be. It's like that Seinfeld episode when Kramer starts getting indoctrinated into communism right after the fall of the Soviet Union, and everywhere he goes, he starts telling people, you don't want to buy that. That was made by slave labor. People who are only making 10 cents an hour in Thailand or something. In other words, make them feel like the world is unfair.
And they're guilty.
They're guilty, or they're being mistreated, and somebody else is guilty. Either way, you're agitating. That's all you're doing is you're agitating. Imagine the people you're seeing in Portland have been feeding on this agitprop
Right.
10, 20, 30 years. Some of these people are in their 50s.
Right.
And this has been going on for decades. I mean, Don, you remember being on the streets of Chicago, getting a copy of the Daily World, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Daily Worker. These were communist. I mean, openly, blatantly communist publications. And I was reading one of them talking about how great life is in the Ukraine. This is back in the late 70s, early 80s, and they were telling me, okay, their electric bill is this, but my question at the time was, how often do they get electricity?
Yeah.
How many hours a day does the electricity work?
That's the question, because I've been to countries like that where they have electricity for 4 hours a day. It doesn't cost them much, but they don't get much either.
Right.
So Christopher Green points out socialist realism, quote unquote, was an art form in the 1950s and 60s that merged Marxism with art and music.
But agitprop was designed for consumption in Western countries.
Right.
It was designed for consumption by people outside. I mean, you didn't want to agitate in the Soviet Union. You wanted people to be satisfied with everything.
Or controlled.
You wanted to agitate outside the Soviet Union.
In capitalist nations, right. So as we're getting near the end here, we're going to run over, Pam, just so you're forewarned. We often do this, 10 minutes or so. I want to make a little bit of a shift. I want to make a comment because you point out that the basic premise that they have is all people are good at heart. Biblically, we know that all people are sinners at heart. You must train children to live by compassion inside them. They already possess this inner compassion because they are good at heart. Create compassionate governments, politics, religions. Now, what they seem to miss is if in fact all people are good at heart, why aren't the governments already good? That doesn't seem to really connect in their minds.
Absolutely.
And end up then with making global citizens. Now that's what's kind of going on in culture, and we can see it permeating culture, and it has been for a long time, as Ron pointed out. You had John Lennon's song "Imagine." We also had the Fifth Dimension with Aquarius.
Yeah, the Age of Aquarius. That was more of an astrology horoscope thing, But
I really liked it because it's back to the idea of the world will be as one. We'll all be together, harmony and understanding, sympathy and trust abounding.
No more falsehood or derision, golden, whatever. Yeah.
Right. Mystic dreams of vision, Christic revelation.
We were all doing the wrong thing back then, weren't we?
Yeah, we were. But here's what has happened is we've had now the rebels of that time, the New Agers, have grown up and become the politicians and celebrity world leaders of our day.
And
the hippies run the universities.
Run the asylum, yeah.
Yeah.
The bombers, the terrorists run, they're in
the sociology departments.
Yeah. So, and for a few minutes, let's look at the church. Because I know, in fact, there may be some people from New Age to Christianity groups that I'm involved with, maybe watching today, and they're leaving New Ageism, coming to the faith, going into the church, and guess what they're finding?
Yeah,
just what they left.
Mysticism.
Right, and they're astounded, and they're going, "How did this happen?" So let's talk for a few minutes about where that's coming from and how that impacts not only the church, but then how does the church interact with society, because there's a connection there.
Well, it is in my slides that you've seen. I think a lot of this, it's always progressive through history. We know the adversary is always at work. He has one goal. He's never changed. So this cycles through history repeatedly. There's always, wherever there is sound doctrine and a solid denomination and a solid church, the adversary is going to work to try to bring in through the edges somewhere false teaching and get toeholds and footholds. So one of the, I believe, historically pivotal moments happened, of course, in the 1960s, but from 1962 to 1965, as you both know, was the Second Vatican Council. And the result of that council One of the things that was established was the Pontifical Council on Interreligious Dialogue, which was promoting interreligious dialogue. There was also one of the documents from Vatican II is called Nostra Aetate, if I'm pronouncing that Latin correctly. I might not be. But that means in our times. And it was saying that the Roman Catholic Church no longer rejected, anything that they said was true in Hinduism, Buddhism, any other religion of the world. They still wanted you to convert to Catholicism, but we're starting this interreligious dialogue. So it really flung the doors open for, at that time, Catholic mystics, and notably among them was Thomas Merton, to go east. They'd already been enamored with the East through the meditative practices of medieval mysticism, of contemplative spirituality, which was already a mystical, very non-biblical, experiential kind of, they called it prayer, but it's not prayer as we would understand it in the Bible. But Thomas Merton went east. As you probably know, in 1968, he went to India, where he participated joyfully in the Temple of Understanding, which drew together Hindu yogis, Buddhist monks, Jewish Kabbalists, Jains, Sufi mystics, which is Islamic mysticism, and a whole host of others. And he announced during his speech to these diverse mystics, he said, brothers, we don't know it. And what we've forgotten and what we have to regain, I'm just paraphrasing him, is the bottom line truth. We already are one. We've just forgotten it. And what we have to regain is that unity. So he saw that mystical experience was the unifier of religions, because they were all experiencing on the altered state of consciousness level the same mystical sense of transcending duality.
Now, let's back up just a second. Let's carefully define altered state of consciousness level. In other words, we're talking about things like trances here. Is that what we're talking about, or something in that category?
Yeah, well, in mysticism, as I'm sure you guys know, the practices kind of universally across the board is to go into a higher, what they believe is a higher state of consciousness where you can directly merge into union with the divinity. So what I mean by altered state of consciousness, then, to get to that different state of consciousness, generally, whether you're chanting endlessly in hesychastic prayer, the Jesus prayer, Lord Jesus Christ, have mercy on me, a sinner. If you're doing that 300, 600, 1,000 times a day, you're stopping your thinking process.
Right.
And if you're a Hindu and you're chanting a particular mantra, Om, over and over and over and over, you're doing that to stop your thinking process. You're doing it to eliminate normal consciousness and thought and awareness around you. And it's really to eliminate the perception of the distinction between your inner self, your soul. In Hinduism, the inner self soul is called Atman. You're trying to awaken a consciousness that is realized in a merging union with the divine. In Hinduism, for instance, Brahman is the impersonal, universal idea, undefinable idea of the divine. Atman, the soul, has always been part of Brahman, and the external illusion called Maya of the real world hinders you from that realization that you're really divine. You're really Brahman. And so through emptying the mind, I'm just illustrating through yoga, through excessive concentration, deep focus on the breath, on breathing, on turning within, and emptying the mind through mantra, chanting, and meditation, a series of other steps, you end up progressively stopping your cognitive mind, silencing the distinctions until you experience, or at least think you're experiencing, merging with Brahman. Now, in mindfulness meditation in Buddhism, you concentrate intensely on nothing but the present moment and on your breathing. And if you're doing a walking meditation, on your slow, intentional walking. Now, this will alter your mind. And it has a kind of hypnotic effect where it's a hypnotic, you enter really into a kind of hypnotic trance state, where then you, particularly in mindfulness meditation of Buddhism, you transcend the ideas of right and wrong, good and evil, and you become ultimately non-judgmental. So everything's okay.
Now,
And
I like to point out from a church historical point of view that by the time you get to the 16th century, where the Protestant Reformation starts, the medieval church had a lot of mysticism in it. Not every medieval theologian was a mystic. In fact, you could probably say most of them that were in the universities weren't. But there was this huge stream of mystical literature, mystical teaching, mystical teachers that you see go running through the Middle Ages. And the Protestant reformers were Lutheran, Reformed, all across the board, except for some Anabaptists. In the beginning, maybe a lot of them. But the Protestant movement put a stop to it. They saw the dangers. They said, no, this is not what the Bible teaches. There is no unmediated contact between my soul and the divine. That removes Christ from the
absolutely
picture. There is one mediator between God and man.
Boy, that's a great point. Yeah.
You always go through
it's unmediated.
Right. And that was part of reforming the church. So if you are now, some people will say, so what? I don't need those stodgy old reformers. Okay, fine. You're not part of the Protestant tradition then. Why don't you just, you can become a Roman Catholic, you can become a cult member, you could become, something outside of evangelicalism. But to call yourself an historic evangelical is just being disingenuous. Now, they've stretched evangelicalism farther than the elastic in my underwear. So it's kind of
well,
kind of worn out right now. We don't.
I told someone the other day I have a real problem because theologically I'm a fundamentalist, and I live kind of in the evangelical church, and so I needed to have a new name. Richard Fisher and I thought about this long and hard, and we developed a new name. We are fungelicals.
That's a very good name for you. But I want to go back to Ron's point, where you pointed out that within historic medieval Christian mysticism, the idea, the practices were to access unmediated union with the divine. And absolutely true. It removes the mediation of Christ. While they might be praying the rosaries or even chanting the name of Jesus Christ, what they were trying to do, in a sense, was self-righteously, and as you know, these famous medieval mystics that we're all aware of, Teresa of Avila, John of the Cross, Ignatius of Loyola, Catherine of Siena, Catherine of Genoa, all these ones, these were all devoted to the most severe forms of ascetic mistreatment of the body. And they were all trying to purge the sin out of themselves in this life because they were not resting in the finished work of Jesus Christ. They were trying to avoid purgatory. And even Catherine of Genoa believed that she had attained not only perfection, but she had attained union with God in essence, where she had become the essence of the divine with God. So they're not resting in the finished work of Christ. They might have crucifixes and statues of Jesus and visions of Jesus, but they weren't resting in the finished work. And this has been flooding, well, since 1978, when Richard Foster, calls himself an evangelical, I've gone blank, George Fox's religion.
Quaker?
Quaker, thank you. I just went blank on it. Evangelical Quaker, he was widely popularized through evangelicalism, and he introduced the mystics, Thomas Merton, all these ones I've named. He reintroduced them into the biblical church that was reclaimed and refounded by the reformers. So you're absolutely right.
Now, we are at the end of our time. We're going to do this again. We're going to do a follow-up on this. We'll have to work out a time. Because this is such an important topic, and I think this rush that we see happening in the church today, we see it obviously with the Enneagram. That's a big one for me because of the book we just did on this. But Richard Rohr's had a big influence, and of course, there were others, as you point out. Thomas Merton, who's in name a Roman Catholic, but in theology a Buddhist, which he admitted to. And Foster is a mystic. And Richard Rohr and these other, I just watched one with two followers of Richard Rohr, and they point back to Teresa of Avila and others as though that is normative Christianity. And as Ron has pointed out, he had this mystical strain that went for several hundred years, which
it never totally went away. It didn't go away during the Reformation, but it was rejected by the Reformation.
Right. So, and now we have a resurgence of it in the church and in culture simultaneously.
Can I make one qualification to what I said? The Bible definitely teaches what you could call a mystical aspect, what has been called a mystical aspect of our relationship with God. The Holy Spirit indwells us. Christ, in fact, the whole Trinity indwells us, but the emphasis is placed on the Holy Spirit. We talk about Christ in you. The Father will come and we will make our dwelling with you, Jesus says, or in you. But it's not based on experience. And it's not designed to result in an experience. It is designed to be believed. It is a truth to be. This is why Luther put so much emphasis on faith, and I think that's a very good. In other words, it's you look at the word. What is the word promise? That's what you lay hold of by faith. You don't look for an experience. That's so. When I was actually quoting Luther when I said there's no unmediated contact with the divine. It's because it is mediated by Christ. It is real. It is spiritual. It's on a spiritual plane. But it's not what you maybe if you see the statue of Teresa of Avila having her heart pierced by the angel, and she's going through these ecstasies, which are kind of embarrassing to look at, really. People have expressed embarrassment. Let me put it that way. It's like, no, that's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about an experience you seek. And I don't want to comment on any particular denominations, but I tell you, some are obsessed with seeking experiences of God, and that is what the Reformers warned us about.
So we're gonna work on a date for the future because we want to do more on this. I think it's really important because it helps to put things in perspective. Where does it come from? Why would we, who say the Bible is our final source of faith and practice, the final word on faith and practice, and if it doesn't conform to that, then we're probably not for it. And that's narrow-minded, but Ron has said I'm sometimes so narrow-minded I can look through a keyhole with both eyes. So that may be true. But in the meantime, we're going to have to walk out of here. Ron, would you walk us out of
Sure you
here?
don't want to run? Okay, well, if you just want to walk, we'll just walk. Okay. Our resident cult leader profiler is Neil before me. Our wardrobe manager is See How It Fits You. Our culinary services are provided by Chef Hammond Cheese. Our tinfoil hypervisioner is Just In Case. Our Jehovah's Witnesses coverage comes from Armageddon and D. Opposer. Our Mormon Archives manager is Polly Gummas. Our Liberal Denominations Bureau Chief is Lucy Goosey. Our transgender issues coverage comes from Ben Hur. Our special correspondent for cults based on the Hindenburg disaster and flying turkeys. Oh, de humanity. Our fact-checking supervisor is Yoleg Pulling. Our technical assistance comes through Murky Research. Our legal advisors at the law firm of Dewey, Cheatham and Howe. Our grievance resolution director is Giovanna Pisamia. Director of Privacy Assurance is Wiretapping, and original idea sourcing comes from Drew A. Blank. The Unknown Webcast is a production of Midwest Christian Outreach Inc. in cooperation with Emergency Manicure Productions, both of whom are totally responsible for this content, although you will never be able to prove that in a court of law. It won't
Never happened.
Not
Never
even.
happened.
Emergency manicure.
Yeah.
It's good. Emergency manicure management. Yeah.
Yeah, we've been production.
Production. Yeah.
You never know when you're going to need an emergency manicure. Sometimes.
Exactly. Yeah. All right. So why don't you both say goodbye, all, and then hang on for a minute.
Bye.
That's all.